She's known as the Inspiration Nurse. Donna Cardillo has written 4 books. She presents programs around the world, especially for women and nurses, about facing your fears and pumping up the volume on your career and life. All this while caregiving for her husband, Joe, who has been living with multiple sclerosis for almost 30 years. Despite life's challenges, Donna makes sure there's still time for joy, and she's devoted her career to helping others do that too. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy, where we share practical advice for weathering life's storms, as well as inspirational stories of resilience. Donna Cardillo, you have long inspired me by the way you persevere through tough times with fortitude, grace, and even a sense of humor. I'm so honored to have you on the show today. Welcome to Still Time for Joy.
Thank you so much, Sandy. It is my pleasure to be here with you today.
We met a good 15 plus years ago at a women's networking event, and that led me to go and take one of your public speaking seminars. And you actually told me something at that public speaking seminar more than 15 years ago that I still remember today. I was looking to do a keynote speech, and I was really nervous about it. And you said to me, "You can do it. I know you can do it." And I was like, Donna Cardillo thinks I can do it. And it really impacted me. So I bring this up because I want you to talk about how just a little bit of encouragement like that from one person can really impact someone's life.
Sandy, that is so true. And it's good that you brought that up because I bring this message out there all the time. A few words, so little encouragement and positivity can really change somebody's life and change their world. And I learned that early on when I began doing public seminars for nurses years ago. I remember a woman I met who was in the audience, and she came up to me afterwards and she told me that she had been out of the workforce for some time. She had a disabled daughter that she'd been caring for, and she wanted to break back into the job market. But of course, she was very nervous and apprehensive and concerned about what she had to offer and what people would think of her when they met her. And she had such wonderful positive energy just in those few minutes we talked. And I said to her, I am confident that you're going to do well because you have such positive energy. You have a great smile. And she started to get tears in her eyes. And I wasn't sure what that was about. And she said to me, and that was pretty much what I said to her to get started. And she said to me, and she was probably a woman about 30 years old or so at the time, she said, "No one has ever said anything like that to me in my life." And I didn't react outwardly, but I thought, wow, nobody has ever said something so small and positive like that to her. And that is when I began to realize that saying those positive, encouraging things to people, first of all, sometimes it truly is something they've never heard before, but we spend so much time in our head thinking about our perceived faults that those few words of encouragement can literally change people's lives or at least start them in a positive forward direction.
Why do you think so many of us have so much self-doubt?
Well, first of all, it tends to be human nature. We are negative by nature. There's even something called a negativity bias. And there's a theory that we evolved that way from prehistoric times when we always had to assume the worst so that we could be prepared to do what we needed to survive. So some theories are that we're actually hardwired toward the negative. But our brain gets more activity with negative thoughts, other things. So we tend to lean toward the negative, and typically people in our lives tend to lean toward the negative also. So we're just surrounded by it, and that sometimes seems to be the norm. And so we have to really work to get positive and motivated. It's something we have to do to get started and something we have to work on continuously on an ongoing basis to combat that negativity. And Sandy, I've also learned that the negative people, the outside people, in our world that influence us, they talk the loudest and the longest. So we hear those messages all the time, where the more positive people sometimes are reluctant to bring those things forward. That's another reason, based on your first question, why it's always important to say positive things to people. For example, We assume if somebody's good at something that they know they're good at it, or if they come across well, we assume that they know that, but they don't necessarily. So it's always good to say, I love the big smile on your face when I see you, or I love the way you interact with people. You have such a nice way about you. I admire your courage or confidence. And they'll say, I'm not courageous or confident. You may not feel that way, but I see that in you. So it's important to say those positive things with everybody in our life, even people that we meet casually at a meeting in a store.
And where did you learn that? Were your parents like that? Were you raised to be that way? Where do you think that comes from, that positivity?
I don't know that that was something that was around me when I was young or when I was growing up at all necessarily, but I think I learned the lesson particularly once I perhaps got into nursing a number of years ago. And just because, of course, a lot of what you're doing, you're providing a lot of care for people, but people, when they are ill, infirmed in a hospital, they certainly need a lot of encouragement because people feel very downtrodden. They sometimes feel hopeless. They're not sure if they're going to recover. So I think I particularly learned the value of that when I was early practicing as a nurse, even as a student nurse, how important those positive, encouraging words were to people, in addition to anything else we might be able to provide for them.
And of course, you are an RN and you've had a long career doing many, many different things. You did spend time at the bedside, in the emergency room, in the psychiatric ward. Is that correct?
Yes, as a nurse. Yes.
But you've also done so many other things. You've been a blogger for Dr. Oz. You were the original Dear Donna columnist for Nurse.com. I want to talk to you now about your public speaking programs. You travel extensively talking to women's groups and also specifically to nurses. What is the message in a lot of your public speaking programs, especially for nurses?
If I had to put it in one word, I would say empowerment. That's always my underlying message, because empowerment is feeling that we are in control of our life, our career, our current circumstances, and having the tools to be able to do that. I want everyone to live an empowered life. And many of us don't feel empowered. I could say particularly women, but really that's another thing I think I've learned since I have my education business and spend so much time with people and people relaying their stories. We sometimes associate that with women, but it's amazing how many similar feelings and experiences both men and women have. We sometimes just put ourselves out into the world a little bit differently, but it's something that's very universal. So I want people to live their best life. I want them to develop confidence in who they are, their own uniqueness. We're often trying to compare ourselves to others or saying, well, look at them and look at what they're doing. But everybody started out somewhere. When I started my education business, for example, some people think I was like, brimming with confidence and know-how, and it was the complete opposite. I had very low self-esteem when I started my business, and I didn't get myself out there because I had any sense of courage. There was something that I wanted to do, and I remember thinking one day, wow, this is like a big thing I want to do, start a business, get out and speak. But then I thought, and there was a lot of fear associated with that, but a greater fear is that I might be on my deathbed one day and say, gee, I wonder what would have happened if I ever put myself out there. I wonder what would have happened if I took a chance on myself. I wonder if I really could have done that, if I could have run a business, if I really could have spoken in front of groups of people. So that was more fearful to me than actually getting out there and trying to do some of the things I wanted to do.
And I remember you telling a story about what somebody said to you early on when you were about to start your speaking business and your career, and how encouraging they were to you. Tell me remind us of that story.
I had the idea to start this business and to start doing seminars for nurses. I'd actually had the idea for 10 years. It's important for people to know also. I had it for 10 years before I started it. And I was really at a low point in my life when I made the decision to start. Sometimes they say we have to scrape rock bottom before we start to reach for the top. And I think when you feel you're at rock bottom, you feel you have nothing more to lose. So it's easier maybe to, go out there and try to do something. So I made the decision, but I was keeping it to myself for a while. I thought if I don't say it out loud, then I can still change my mind, as a protection. But then I realized one day that I was going to have to start telling people. I told my immediate family, but I was going to have to start telling people in my wider circle what I was planning and that I had made a decision to do this. So I was working in an antique center at the time because I also would sell antiques on the side. I had one of these individual spots in a multi-dealer shop. And I thought, okay, today's the day. I'm going to tell all my colleagues here in the antiques business. And so I said, well, I wanted to tell you all I'd made a decision. And this was a huge, huge thing for me to be able to do this. It was just huge for me to get it out. I said, I've decided to start a business and I'm going to run public seminars for nurses. And the manager of the store, who I had known for a while, wouldn't consider them a friend, but certainly an acquaintance, he turned it to me and he had this look on his face of disgust. And he said to me, what could you possibly have to say to anyone that they would want to listen to? And he said it with such fervor and feeling and venom even in his voice. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, he's right. What was I thinking? Whatever made me think I could do this? It's too big. I can't do it. And when I left the shop that day, I remember sitting in my car. I was really shaken and rattled. I didn't even know if I could drive home in the state that I was in. But I took a few deep breaths, which is always a great place to start. And I said to myself, okay, Donna, if you're really going to do this, you have to put emotional blinders on. You have to keep your sights set on your goal. And you have to be ready for people telling you why you can't, why you shouldn't. And because the naysayers are everywhere, Sandy. They're everywhere. Even strangers are naysayers sometimes. Sometimes we live with the naysayers, which is really challenging. But I thought if you're really going to do this, you just have to set your sights on your goal and you have to move forward from there. And that's what I did. It wasn't easy. It was something I learned along the way. But I fought to continue toward that goal.
And how did that make you feel when he said that? What a terrible thing to say to somebody.
Yeah, it made me feel like I was nothing, like I had absolutely nothing to offer in the world. And here I was getting up my courage to speak, to tell my truth, to use my voice, to share my excitement and my dreams. And he just totally squashed it. So this is the other thing I realized that day I was sitting in the car before I drove home. I thought, okay, Donna, consider the source. This is a guy who is really not doing much of anything with his life. He's not really contributing to life in any way. And I have since learned that when people tell you you can't do something or you shouldn't do something, it's not ever about you. I didn't know that in that moment, but I know now it's never about you. It's always about them. Because if they believe something's not possible and you go out there and do it, then they have to reflect on their own life and where they are. And maybe they can't continue with their narrative. Because, for example, I heard many people say, nobody succeeds in business anymore. I thought, how could somebody say that? There's people in business all over the place. But people actually said that to me. Things like that. So if somebody believes that, then they can use that to justify either their own failure or their own perceived failure or their own resistance to going ahead and doing it. So then when somebody else goes out and does it, then they have to self-reflect and say, well, I'm saying nobody succeeds in business, but there's somebody that's succeeding. Yeah. I might have to change my narrative. This I've just learned in the last 20 or 30 years.
Something we wish we all knew very early on. But I want to talk about your speaking programs again in a little more detail. And I know that the fact that fear comes up when you're trying something new, when you're stepping outside your comfort zone, is a huge thing that you talk about. Why are we so fearful when trying something new? And I think part of it is often a fear of looking foolish. Like, why do we worry about these things? And what can we do about it?
Well, again, it's human nature. We beat ourselves up individually, but from all the reading and the work and the study and speaking with experts that I've done, so much of this is just inborn in us. It's just there, regardless of how we were raised. Maybe how we were raised has a little bit of impact, but Anytime we're doing something new, because it's very easy to settle into a comfort zone where we've mastered something, we know the answers, we can, do it without really thinking about it. So when we're going to try something new or stretch ourselves in any way, we have to get out of that comfort zone. And people have a tendency to feel fearful. They're afraid they're going to look foolish. They're afraid they're not going to know what to do. They're afraid they're going to perhaps a perceived failure. And I always use the word perceived failure because failure doesn't mean you didn't do it great the first time, or maybe that it didn't even work out as you thought. To me, that's not failure. That's called experience. And so we're just so worried about everything like that. And the other issue is, so I also have, since I started my business, I've learned that fear is always automatically part of the equation when you're doing something new, and especially when you're setting a goal. And the bigger the goal, the bigger the fear. So a lot of people associate fear with danger, like, oh, I feel afraid. That must mean I should stay away. That must mean I should pull back. But I now know there are two kinds of fear. There's a kind of fear we experience when we're walking down a dark alley at night in a bad part of town, and we fear our physical safety. But there's the other type of fear that we were just talking about when we're trying something new, and I refer to that as growing pains. So I always say to people, if you're not feeling any fear with this goal that you have, then it's too easy for you. You need to find something that's going to challenge you. And I've so often had people say, oh, Donna, there is something I want to do, but I'm so afraid. I say, excellent. That validates for me that you're on the right track. Now, they don't expect to hear that. They say, okay, but I'm petrified. I said, excellent. That's even more reason to move in that direction. That means you're on the right track.
But when someone feels that way, just one thing, what's the first step they should do?
Yeah. So first of all, it is important to understand that fear is always part of the equation. So you're not necessarily going to get rid of it. You're not necessarily going to squelch it. You have to learn to move forward along with it. And when I did my first seminar, for example, that was one of the most immense states of fear I had ever been in my life. I said to myself, and I'm talking to fear, I'm saying, okay, you pain in the butt. If you are going to be here, just get out of my way. Walk alongside me if you need to, but let's just move forward with this. And then what happens is that fear will dissipate once you do something for the first time or you master a new skill until the next challenge comes along. Making friends with fear. So acknowledging that it's going to be there and moving forward in spite of it. But waiting for it to go away or trying to squelch it, that's not going to happen.
And the other thing that you talk about to people in your seminars and presentations is that you don't always have to know what it's going to look like 5 years down the road. You have an idea, but you may not be able to see everything about how to do it, how it's going to look, how it's all going to turn out. And you tell people that's okay. Just get started, right?
Right, exactly. Sandy, so many people get frozen in place because they say, I don't know where I want to be 5 years from now, or maybe this is what I'm going to do, but I don't know what the end game is. That's okay. I have found that most people don't know where they want to be 5 years from now, or they're not really sure, and so much can change in that time. So rather than being frozen in place, you have to put one foot in front of the other. You have to start to build momentum. You have to start to move forward. And by moving forward in small ways, doing small things, eventually the right path is going to reveal itself to you. What I originally envisioned for my business and started out doing public seminars for nurses, I thought that's what I would do for the next 30 years. And I would do those all across the country. But over the first couple of years, for a variety of reasons that don't even matter, I realized that there was something additional I wanted to do, something more, but I couldn't have planned for those things because I didn't even know they existed back then. So you have to get yourself out into the world in small ways. When I made a decision to start my business and run seminars, one of the first things that I did is I said, okay, I'm going to have to just get myself out there and start networking, which is scary for most of us. I didn't even have a great outfit in my closet at the time. I had one halfway decent red dress, and I hoped nobody, that's all I ever wore in the beginning because that's really all the only business sort of clothes I had. I hoped that, nobody saw me for the second time and they'd think, gee, doesn't she have any other clothes? And if they asked me, I'd say, well, actually, I don't. But I just forced myself in a good way to get out to nursing career fairs in the area originally. I had to kind of just get myself back in that world and start to meet people. And I had a very simple business card made for myself. Sandy, I recommend that everybody have a business card made for themselves. I always say anybody who's anybody needs a business card, and everybody is somebody. You don't have to have a business to have a business card. Just put your name on it. You can put your credentials if you have any, put a phone number, an email address, your LinkedIn or Facebook handle if you care to, so that you have a way to exchange your contact information with people when you get out into the world. You never know who you're going to meet where. And I learned to hone my networking skills, and when you do it regularly, you become a little more comfortable with it.
I remember another thing that you told me when I was trying to start some new things and had some fear around it. You said a good thing to do is to write down some of the things you've accomplished in the past. And I did that. I looked at my resume and I looked at my bio and I made a little list of some things. I mean, it sounds a little crazy, but it's so funny. You're reading your own resume or your own bio and you're like, wow, look at all these things that I've done. And it just somehow makes it a little easier to move forward with something new. You almost forget about all the things you've accomplished already.
You do. You do it. And it's not crazy at all, because we have a tendency to look at where we are now and where we want to be. And we forget about everything that's gone before. And we, accomplish things and we do things. And then we sort of push that aside and we start looking to the future. So that is an exercise that I recommend regularly, making a list of your lifelong accomplishments. It could be professional or personal. It could be raising good kids. It could be getting through a serious illness. It could be getting a college degree or a high school GED. There's a lot of different things that it could be. And when you put it in writing, it's not enough to think about it, because when it's in your head, it's abstract. When you write it down, it's concrete. So the act of recalling, writing, and then reading it starts to really bring it home. I remember when I created my first resume, because nurses didn't really need resumes back in the day. We just showed up at a hospital and they're like, when can you start? Those days are long gone. But when I created my first resume, first of all, my husband was reminding me of things that I'd done that I didn't even remember. I'm like, oh yeah, that is important. And when I created that resume, since you brought up your resume, it's a really great exercise, because now I had this written document reminding me of a lot of the amazing things that I had done that I really wasn't reflecting on a regular basis. And yeah, going back and reading it, adding to it whenever, that's a very powerful exercise.
In addition to your work with nurses, I know you hold retreats that are sometimes for nurses, but can be for other people as well. What is the focus of those retreats? I know sometimes they're about writing and sometimes they're about empowerment. Can you give me an idea what those retreats are like? Because I'm dying to go on one of them one day, by the way.
So I've been doing retreats for about 12 years or so. I absolutely love doing retreats because it's a smaller group of people, a more intimate environment. I have done retreats for half days and full days, but mostly I do weekend-long retreats now. And most of my retreats are targeted to nurses, but I also do retreats for women from any background. And I have also done some retreats for family caregivers, those of us like yourself and myself who have individuals at home who are sick or disabled or elderly. And so the focus of my retreats initially was about empowerment, personal and professional empowerment. But last year I offered a new retreat, which is about a writing retreat for nurses. And it's not writing for publication or the skill of writing, but it's about expressive writing. It's about using the written word to express yourself, to tell your stories. And I am a certified writing workshop facilitator with the Amherst Writers and Artists group, which is a specific methodology that we use to allow people to use the written word in a safe and comfortable environment, and not only to write, but then to share with others. And we don't critique each other's work. That's not the purpose of this particular workshop, But just as we were talking about the value of positive feedback, what we do share with each other is what stood out for you, what was strong, what was vibrant in something that you wrote. And that is exactly the kind of feedback we need when you feel very vulnerable when you're writing. And I, as the workshop leader, also write in that workshop. I don't ask anybody in the group to do anything that I'm not doing myself, but that's exactly the sort of feedback you need to hear from other people. The writing doesn't even have to be personal. It could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, and we assume it's all fiction, so you're not necessarily bearing your soul. But it is, and I have attended workshops like that. It's an incredible experience. It's something that everybody should attend at some point in their life. So those are the empowerment retreats. I either do Empowered Nurse, Enlightened Practice, or Empowered Woman, Enlightened Life. And then now I do the writing retreat for nurses as well.
And when you do the retreats, what kind of changes do you see in people, or what kind of feedback do you get from the participants about how they've changed or what they've learned or what the experience was like for them?
So in addition to the actual work and the discussion, the presentation, and the exercises we might do, I always look for a facility or an environment that is very beautiful, that is very tranquil, that is very immersed in nature to hold those events, because that is as much a part of the experience as what we actually might do when we're together in a group. Because nature is healing and we are part of nature. And so, the word retreat itself means pulling away, pulling back. So we're pulling away, pulling back from our everyday life and responsibilities. So first of all, that is an experience that many people have not ever had. And the feedback is always amazingly transformative for everyone who comes. I have done some studies where I ask people to rate their stress levels and how reactive they are beforehand. And then afterwards, there's always an improvement. Not surprising. People feel more calm and centered. They feel more focused on perhaps their goals or the things that they want to do in life. Their own self-esteem is elevated. They get more confidence in what it is that they want to do going forward. And there is something about spending that time, that camaraderie, the learning as well as the fun, being together with like-minded or kindred spirits, whether we're all women together or we're all nurses together or all people interested in writing together. There is something about that. And again, that's an experience that many of us don't have in our everyday life or that we've never had before. So I myself try to go on 1 or 2 retreats as an attendee every year. Of course, I facilitate several retreats, and that's self-care for me as well. And I go off and do some things by myself as well. I might attend someone else's retreat that they're facilitating, but I also go by myself to some retreat centers and other things that I do just for myself. I wasn't always like that, Sandy. It's something I have learned to do over the years.
How does that make you feel when you have participants tell you that an experience that you've provided has been transformative?
Well, it validates for me the work that I'm doing out in the world. And certainly you want to know that what you're doing is making a difference for people. So that's what I'm really focused on. And this is the thing that I tell individuals who maybe want to speak or write or even facilitate retreats. They say, oh, I don't know if, why would I be the one to do this? Or do I know enough or whatever? I say, you know what? It's really not about you. It's really about the people that come and the value that they're getting out of. And that's what you have to focus on. And a lot of women particularly, but some men also have what's called imposter syndrome, where no matter how many degrees or how much experience we have, we always feel we're not good enough, or that one of these days we're going to be found out, that we're an imposter in life. The good news for those of us, including myself, who suffer from imposter syndrome, is that it's usually women who are educated and experienced who suffer from that. And so, and I've had women say to me, well, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? I say, you probably will never overcome it, but what you want to do is focus on who you're working with and take the focus off of you, because that's where it's really about. If you focus on yourself, you're just constantly filled with self-doubt and questioning yourself. So when I get up and speak to an audience, it's not about whether or not I'm the greatest speaker on the planet, but it's about the value that any audience on that particular day got from not only what I presented, but how I presented it. In a way that got through to them, that got into their head or their heart, makes them feel better, makes them feel more excited and enthusiastic. So that's where I put my focus for these events, and that's what keeps me continuing to do the work that I'm doing. That's why I so appreciate feedback. If someone sends me, I do get written evaluations from the retreats I do, but if someone perhaps heard me speak somewhere or they read one of my books and they send me an email and they tell me how much the book helped them, that they were in a difficult time in their life, for example, if they read the book Falling Together, and that really helped to get them through, or they read Your First Year as a Nurse and that got them through their first year in nursing. I so appreciate that feedback because it validates for me that what I'm doing is needed, is helpful, and that's what gets me out of bed every morning, Sandy.
And I just was about to bring up your book, Falling Together: How to Find Balance, Joy, and Meaningful Change When Your Life Seems to Be Falling Apart. You talk about some of your personal stories in there, some adversity you've overcome, as well as others' experiences. What were you hoping to accomplish when you wrote this book?
So I had been doing a lot of career work and different things with nurses over the years and with women, empowerment. And people had been saying to me for a long time, when are you going to write a motivational book? Or let's say an inspirational book. So I decided to write Falling Together, and I share some of my own experiences, not because I think everybody wants to know about my life, but I want to share I did share some of my personal challenges as well as some other things, because you may not have had my experiences as the reader, but hopefully you can glean lessons from the things that I learned and then apply them to your own life. So I was going through whatever kind of crisis you want to call it, a spiritual crisis, when I turned 40, which I understand is often a pivotal time for women. I read in one of Gail Sheehy's books, who wrote the book Passages and the follow-ups, she said 40 is when we first become very aware of our own mortality. I didn't know that when I turned 40. I learned this later. So I share that, what was going on. And so many women say, oh my gosh, thank goodness you wrote about that, because that's what I have experienced, and I really thought it was only me. So that's really why I wrote the book, because so many of us, we live in maybe a somewhat isolated, small world. We don't talk about the challenges we have. We do think that we are the only ones, and that's often why we're afraid to talk about them. But I wanted to put it out there. I wanted people to know about some of my struggles, as well as some of my dreams and goals, and how I got started writing and speaking and starting a business, and the things that I was up against there. So I wanted to give voice to others. That's a lot of the reason that writers write. We want to give voice to others who have not yet crafted their voice or don't have an opportunity to express themselves. So when someone says to me, I felt like you were speaking to me, or I felt like you wrote that for me, or I see so much of myself in your story, that's exactly why I wrote the book. And it was very challenging for me I had to really lay my soul bare in a lot of those chapters, especially over my first marriage breaking up and everything that was going on at that time. Certainly when my husband was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, that was an incredibly dark, black, devastating time in our life. I share that also, but I'm not just sharing the stories. I'm sharing how I worked through it, how we worked through it, because that's ultimately what I want people to leave with.
And I love that at the end of chapters you have lessons learned, because this show is about giving practical advice and also inspiration. So, and at your core, I think you are very practical, right? You like to have good advice to give. And I'll just read a couple here. There are no wrong decisions, only different lessons to learn. Decisions create action, and action creates results. A well thought out decision, even one that dares to assume some risk, is a powerful force. And finally, seeking professional help if needed in times of crisis and major change is a sign of strength. So it's wonderful that you have practical advice in there, as well as all the lessons that can be learned from just reading the stories. I wanted to mention getting help, because I know, you were a caregiver you still are a caregiver for your husband.
Yes, I am.
What is the importance of seeking professional help?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you read that one and you're bringing this up, because some people think that you're supposed to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, and get out there and put on a good face and all. But that is that is not necessary. That is not the case. I'm going to say that's not the case at all. We have to find help and support, certainly from family and friends, but professional help and support. I think everybody should see a mental health counselor at least once in their life. And many people have a stigma about that. They think that if they see a mental health counselor, it's because they have some sort of mental illness. Absolutely not the case. And remember, I'm a healthcare professional for a long time also. Licensed clinical social workers, psychiatric nurse practitioners, psychologists. There are many people out there that help us navigate our way through life's challenges. And the first time I went to see a counselor, one of the most devastating times was when my first marriage was imploding and I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, and counseling was very helpful to get me back on track. I could have gotten very sick physically sick with what was going on. And then when my husband and I started dating initially, and he had been married before, had children, there were, custody things and all. That's a very challenging situation for everybody involved. And we went to see a family counselor at that time to help us navigate our way through part-time parenting when kids and families are going through a divorce. I don't know how we would have gone through that without having a professional counselor. And then when my husband was diagnosed with MS, another huge incident in our life, and my husband first started going to counseling. I give him so much credit for that. And then I started to go with him, and then I started to go myself over everything that was changing in our life. And we were dealing with grief. Even though I'm a healthcare professional, I previously associated grief in my mind only when someone dies and you lose someone to death. But I realized then, and certainly realize now, that we experience grief in a lot of different ways and a lot of different levels, and loss of many aspects of our life and relationships. We experience grief. So that was part of our experience. But I attribute the counseling that we went to when my husband was diagnosed with MS for both he and I to be in the place that we are in today. And we are actually in a good place. Even though my husband is very physically disabled, he's become paraplegic, not exactly from the MS, but from some other medical complications. And yet people sometimes find it hard to believe that we can have a smile on our face, that we can be happy and joyful and grateful in our lives every day. And that's a choice that we make every day. We choose to focus on our gifts and our blessings rather than on anything that we might have lost. And we choose to be grateful for that every day. That's how we choose to live. And that has made all the difference in both of our lives.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk about gratitude and the role that that plays in helping us get through really difficult times. Talk to me a little bit about that. Even when things are really dark, the role gratitude can play in making a big difference.
No matter what is happening in our life, there are always things to be grateful for. If the sun came up this morning, if you have a roof over your head, there's always something to be grateful for in our life. And again, we tend toward the negative. We have a tendency to focus on the dark side, but shifting to those things to be grateful for, even a beautiful day, the birds singing outside, the people that you have in your life, helps you to refocus your energy and understand that in spite of all the challenges and even perhaps a lot of darkness that's going on in your life right now, you still can be joyful and grateful. And another thing I have learned, Sandy, in the last 30 years, there was a time in my life that I thought some people have a difficult life and other people do not, when I was younger and did not have a lot of worldly experience. I know now, and after so many people sharing their stories with me over the years, everyone struggles with one or many things. And sometimes the struggle is visible on the outside, perhaps with their physical condition or disability, but there are so many hidden struggles from their past, from their present, emotional, relational, financial. There's so many things that can be going on with people that we just can't see on the outside. Gratitude can save you in your darkest, deepest moments. Focusing on gratitude can save you and keep you afloat.
And you're also a certified meditation teacher. How about the role of meditation in helping you to get through not just tough times, but all times?
Fortunately, I had an opportunity to be indoctrinated into meditation years ago. It was actually an unknown gift to me at the time because the practice of meditation, just to put it very simply, is being able to transition from the external world, this world we live in all the time and do things, into what I call the internal world. And that's our internal life where our true essence lies, our intuition, our spirit, that core that we have. And when we take even a few moments to do that, and there's lots of different ways to meditate. Focusing on your breathing is a very common practice. That's what I teach. That's what I practice. Even those few minutes of stillness and of silence, and stillness and silence are what we're going for in meditation. We're not trying to stop our mind from thinking. That's almost impossible. People say, I can't meditate. I can't stop my mind from thinking. That those few moments of slowing down is an opportunity for us to reconnect with ourselves, because we often just get so disconnected from ourselves and who we are because we get so caught up in things out there. It gives our nervous system an opportunity to calm down and to settle down, for us to become more aware of how we're feeling. Some people are unhappy in their maybe a relationship or a job, and some of us keep ourselves so busy because we don't want to think about those things. We don't want to focus on them. In fact, I think that's why some people maybe don't even want to meditate, because the minute they stop and slow down for a few minutes, they may be confronted with some challenging things. Not everybody, but that's just one example. I met a woman once. She said, every time I sit down to meditate, I start crying. Now that tells me that there's something she needs to cry about, and it's right under the surface. And it's only when she gives herself a moment to slow down. But I don't want you to think that you're going to sit and meditate and you're going to start crying or think about how unhappy you are. It is time for yourself to stay connected to yourself, and that becomes an anchor in your life that can make you stronger and help you weather life's challenges.
And one more thing I want to talk about as far as getting through tough times is humor. And you're known for your sense of humor. You call yourself even a cut up. Where do you get your sense of humor from, and how does that help you get through?
Well, I have to say both of my parents had a great sense of humor, and both of my parents had a hard scrabble life growing up, and my father was very much a self-made man, and took a lot of risks and different things, but there was always laughter in my house, no matter what was going on, what the challenges were. There was laughter and fun. So I do say that's one of the greatest gifts that my parents did bestow on us. And even if it really no matter what was going on. So that is something that I and my siblings inherited. And there is humor to be found in almost everything. I also know, as being a healthcare professional, and we talk a lot about humor and laughter in healthcare. There's therapeutic value to laughter and humor, watching movies or reading things that make us laugh. There's actually some chemical and different things that happen in our body. But when you can look at life and laugh in the face of challenge and even darkness when it's appropriate, it's not always appropriate, but that helps to keep that balance that we talk about. I talk about going on retreat to help balance the intensity of our everyday life. Talk about meditation, going inward to help balance the rigors of our external life. And then finding ways and being with people who make you laugh, going out for fun times, even if it's just one person or a phone call. Sandy, I get together with my colleagues from nursing school. We get together every year now. We started doing that about 10 years ago, and that was one of the best things we did. We now spend a whole weekend together. We rent a big beach house at the beautiful Jersey Shore in New Jersey. And honestly, what do we do all weekend? We laugh. We tell stories and we laugh. And we're all at a stage of life. Some of us have lost spouses. Some have lost children. Many of us have chronic illness. The world is a little bit crazy right now, but we have this amazing time together that just gives us such joy to be together and to be doing all that laughing. And we laugh at stories from when we were in nursing school from so long ago. They seem funnier today than they even did back then. And we love telling them and retelling them. So finding people to be with that are, fun and laughter and whatever. Seek those people out in your life. You want to seek people out that give you joy, that you can laugh with, that you can talk with, that you can enjoy things with.
So as we're wrapping up now, I just want to ask you if you had to name one or two things that are most important because you are the inspiration nurse, that will apply whether you're a nurse or whether you're somebody who wants to get started. Maybe it's something you've been thinking about for many years. Oh, I always want to do XYZ, and they just can't seem to get started. What's one or two pieces of advice you could give?
Here's my 5-step for living. I want to give you that first. I always say,
five
they're
we
very
have
brief.
to do.
They're very, very brief. They're very short. Five quick steps. So when an opportunity comes along, a lot of people say, like you have an opportunity to write or a job or whatever. Oh, I can't do that. So this is what I say. Number one, say yes. You don't have to believe you can do it. You just say yes. Number two, you go into a deep state of panic. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Why did I say yes? What were they thinking? I'm going to fail miserably. I'm going to embarrass myself. You have to get that out of your system. Number three, figure out how to do it. And my gosh, you can figure out how to do anything today. You can Google it. You can go to the library. There's so many resources. You do it the best you can, and then you celebrate having done it. I say there is no failure. There's only different lessons to learn. So remember I talked earlier I always talk about perceived shortcomings, perceived failures. If you start, a lot of people say, oh, what if I send in an article for publication and I get a rejection letter? I say, yippee, celebrate that rejection letter. That means that you have arrived, because that's a rite of passage. Call your friends, call your neighbors, Xerox the rejection letter and put it in everybody's mailbox. They're like, oh, they're going to think I'm crazy. No, because you have already gone further than most people will ever go. That's just an example. So you get out there, you do the best you can. That's where the true living is, Sandy, by getting out there. And none of us wants to be on our deathbed and say, I wish I had done this. I wish I had tried it. I wonder what would have happened. They say when we're on our deathbed, we don't so much regret the things we did as the things that we didn't do.
What a great list. Donna, last thing I want to say is the dedication in your book, Falling Together, is to your father. In memory of my father, Stanley E. Wilk, the ultimate resilient spirit. What would your father think about what you've accomplished in your life and your career?
Well, my father definitely has got a big smile on his face right now that we're, talking about him publicly. And actually, I wear his wedding ring here on my finger. My father was so proud of everything, of course, that I did. In fact, as I said, he had a very hard Scrabble life. He survived a lot in his life. We really learned a lot from his example, because he would get something in his head that he wanted to do, and he would go out and do it. Again, life dealt him a lot of challenges when he was young, at many times in his life, but he just always kept going and always continued to do things that he wanted to do and enjoy life. So yeah, he's absolutely cheering me on every step of the way. No question.
Donna, it's been wonderful to have you on the show today. You are an inspiration to so many people. You've inspired me in many ways. It's wonderful to hear all your great advice, and I thank you so much for being here today.
Sandy, it has been my pleasure. See you soon.
If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it, and follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms, as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.